When the human entered, the alien Empress trembled in fear, as if she recognized him the day Captain Mark Rylan entered the Imperial Palace. A strange feeling lingered in the air. The sprawling city of Viarine was known for its advanced technology and peaceful rule under Empress Zyrakin, but nothing could prepare the inhabitants for what was about to happen. Rylan was a human, one of the few sent to this alien world for diplomatic purposes. His mission was clear: engage with the Empire of Zyrakin, negotiate peace, and create stronger ties between his people and the alien race. He had done this before with other species, but something about this mission felt different. As Rylan walked through the grand halls, his steps echoing in the silence, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. He had been briefed on the alien history, the Empress's rise to power and her unwavering control over her people. Yet, he had no idea what lay ahead. The alien world felt vast, and its inhabitants were unlike any human he had encountered before: strong, intelligent, and secretive. The guards at the entrance greeted him with respect, bowing their heads as he approached. Rylan nodded politely, though the unease he felt earlier remained. Something was off, but he couldn't pinpoint what. When he entered the throne room, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The grand room was illuminated by brilliant white light that seemed to pour from the ceiling, casting a soft glow over everything. At the far end, on an elevated platform, sat Empress Zyrakin, her eyes locked on him as he stepped forward. Zyrakin was unlike any ruler he had ever seen. Her regal presence was overwhelming, her alien features stunning. Her skin shimmered in hues of violet and silver, and her eyes, large and expressive, seemed to pierce through him. She wore a ceremonial gown made of an unknown material, flowing effortlessly as she moved, her long hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of starlight. Yet, it wasn't just her beauty that caught Rylan's attention. It was the way she gazed at him, as if she had seen him before. The moment their eyes met, something strange happened. Zyrakin's expression faltered, her confident demeanor momentarily slipping. A tremor passed through her body, so slight that no one else in the room seemed to notice. But Rylan did. He saw the way her pupils dilated and the faintest hint of fear in her gaze. He didn't understand it. She was the empress of an entire galaxy-spanning empire. She ruled with strength and wisdom, and yet she trembled before him, an unknown human from a distant planet. The room fell silent as the Empress recovered, her expression once again masked in regal composure. "Captain Mark Rylan," she said, her voice smooth and commanding. "Welcome to Viarine. It is an honor to have you here." Rylan couldn't help but feel uneasy as he stepped forward to meet her. Her words were polite, but her eyes were unreadable. He could feel the weight of her scrutiny, as though she was searching for something in him, something he couldn't yet comprehend. "I am honored, Empress," Rylan replied, bowing slightly as he spoke. "I hope to establish a lasting peace between our worlds." Zyrakin nodded, her gaze never leaving him. "Your mission is important," she said, "but I must confess there is something familiar about you, Captain, something I cannot place." Rylan felt a chill run down his spine. Her words echoed in his mind. Familiar, how could that be? He had never met her before. As far as he knew, this was their first encounter, yet the way she spoke made him feel as if they had crossed paths long ago. Before he could respond, one of her advisors stepped forward, breaking the silence. "Your Excellency, the meeting." Zyrakin raised a hand, silencing the advisor. Her eyes remained fixed on Rylan, her expression intense. "No," she said softly. "Let the captain speak." Rylan hesitated for a moment before speaking, unsure of what to say. Perhaps it is the way humans and aliens sometimes find a strange connection, one that is not easily explained." Zyrakin's eyes narrowed, as if she was searching his words for hidden meaning. But then she relaxed, nodding slowly. "Yes," she murmured, almost to herself. "Perhaps it is as you say." The tension in the room lifted, but Rylan still felt the weight of her gaze on him. It was as though she was trying to decipher his very soul. The meeting proceeded, but the strange encounter left a lingering question in Rylan's mind. Why did she seem so familiar with him? Why had she reacted the way she did? He knew that answers would come in time, but for now, he had to focus on the mission at hand. As the meeting concluded, and Rylan was escorted out of the throne room, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There was more to Zyrakin and her empire than he had initially believed. And somehow he was going to be a part of whatever came next, whether he was ready or not. The night after the meeting, Empress Zyrakin lay awake in her chambers, staring at the glowing ceiling above. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the palace's advanced technology working in the background. Yet, despite the serenity of the environment, her mind raced. She couldn't shake the strange feeling she had experienced when she first laid eyes on Captain Mark Rylan. It wasn't just that he was human, she had met humans before. It wasn't even the diplomatic mission, though she could sense the weight of his visit. No, it was something far deeper. His eyes, his presence, something about him seemed familiar, as if she had known him for a lifetime, yet she was certain this was their first encounter. Zyrakin had ruled for centuries, her intelligence sharp and her mind quick to understand the complexities of the universe. But this human, this one man, was making her question everything she thought she knew. She sat up, her violet gown flowing around her. The palace was still, but she could feel a shift in the air as if something important was coming. Something she had been waiting for, even if she didn't fully understand what it was. Her hand reached out and touched the small, ancient artifact on her nightstand, a pendant, worn and faded with age. It had belonged to her mother, a symbol of power and wisdom. The pendant had been passed down through generations of rulers. When Zyrakin had first become Empress, she had worn it proudly, believing it to be a simple token of her lineage. But now, as her fingers brushed against it, she realized it wasn't just a piece of jewelry. There was a power hidden within it, something that tied her fate to the human she had met earlier. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to a time long ago, before she had become Empress, before she had even ascended to her position of power. There was a place in her memory, a place she had buried so deep it had almost been forgotten. A meeting, a human. She saw his face clearly now. It wasn't just a vision, it was a memory. She remembered his eyes exactly like Rylan's. She remembered the feeling of his presence, how it had stirred something inside her, something primal. It had been years since that encounter, and yet the memory felt as fresh as if it had happened only moments ago. She tried to push the thought away. It was impossible. That was a different time, a different life. She had been young, and the galaxy had been a different place altogether. But the memory lingered like a shadow that refused to leave. In that moment, Zyrakin realized something that terrified her. Captain Rylan wasn't just a man from Earth. He was part of something far greater, something older than the empire she ruled. He was the key to unlocking a past she had long since tried to forget. And perhaps, just perhaps, he was the one who could change the future of the galaxy. But what did that mean for her empire? She stood abruptly, the pendant falling from her hand and landing softly on the table. There was no more time for hesitation. She had to learn the truth. The next morning, Zyrakin summoned her most trusted advisor, Counselor Verk. Verk had served her loyally for many years, helping her navigate the complexities of ruling an empire. He was wise, knowledgeable, and had an uncanny ability to discern when something was wrong. "Verk," Zyrakin said as he entered her chambers, "I need you to find everything you can about Captain Rylan, his history, his connections, his people, everything." Verk bowed, his face expressionless but his eyes sharp. "Of course, Your Excellency, I will have it for you within the hour." Zyrakin watched him leave and turned her gaze back to the distant horizon outside her window. She could feel the weight of the decision that loomed before her. The universe was vast, and yet it seemed that this one human could disrupt everything she had built. She had always trusted her instincts, but this was different. This wasn't just a matter of diplomacy or politics. This was something much more personal. Hours later, Verk returned with a datapad in hand. "Your Excellency, I've gathered the information you requested. Captain Mark Rylan is from Earth, a planet located in a distant part of the galaxy. His mission here is officially a diplomatic one, but his history is troubling." Zyrakin raised an eyebrow. "Troubling?" Verk nodded. "It seems that his family has a long history of involvement in conflicts, wars that spanned across several systems. His father was a renowned military strategist, known for his brutal tactics. His mother was a diplomat who worked to create peace with hostile species. But there is something else, something deeper." "What is it?" Zyrakin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Captain Rylan's lineage is rumored to trace back to an ancient human ruler, one who was believed to have disappeared centuries ago," Verk continued. "Some say he was the first human to wield extraordinary power, a power that could rival the greatest forces in the galaxy. There are rumors that this power was sealed away, lost to time, and now it seems that the captain has unknowingly inherited it. Zyraken's heart skipped a beat. This was what she had feared. Captain Rylan wasn't just another diplomat. He was a man of destiny, a man whose existence threatened the balance she had worked so hard to create. "Do you think he knows?" Zyraken asked, her voice cold and steady. "I believe he's unaware of the full extent of his heritage," Verk replied. "But it seems the power is awakening within him, and as you feared, it may have something to do with you." Zyraken stood and walked toward the balcony, looking out over the sprawling city below. Her thoughts were racing. If what Verk said was true, Ryland's arrival wasn't a coincidence. He was connected to her in ways that defied explanation, and that frightened her more than anything. "We must tread carefully," Zyraken said, her voice firm. "Prepare for our next meeting with Captain Rylan. I want him to feel welcome, but we cannot let him suspect what he is. Not yet." Verk bowed again. "Understood, Your Excellency." As he left, Zyraken stood alone in the quiet of her chambers, staring into the distance. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but she was no closer to understanding the bigger picture. What did it all mean? What was her true role in this unfolding drama? She didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear. The galaxy, her empire, and even her own fate were now tied to Captain Mark Rylan in ways she could not control. And whether she was ready for it or not, the future was coming fast. The days following her conversation with Verk felt like a blur to Empress Zyraken. Every step she took in the palace seemed to be weighed down by the new revelations about Captain Mark Rylan. His presence in the Empire had started to feel less like a simple diplomatic mission and more like the arrival of a force she couldn't control. She knew that she had to act fast, but there was one thing that still bothered her. Why did he seem so familiar? The memory of the past had been quiet for so long, buried deep within her mind, but now it felt like it was clawing its way back. Every time Zyraken closed her eyes, she could see him, the human. His face was as clear as day, yet she couldn't place it. The connection between them was undeniable, but it was something that felt like it belonged to another life, a life she had long since forgotten. Her advisors had been busy with the preparations for the next meeting with Captain Rylan, but Zyraken couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes had become much higher. She had to know the truth, not just about Rylan, but about the prophecy that had been hidden for centuries. The palace was always busy with activity, but today it felt different. The servants moved with urgency, the soldiers at their posts more alert than usual. Zyraken had never felt so on edge. She knew she had to make a choice, whether to confront Rylan and risk everything or continue playing the game, pretending that nothing had changed. But something inside her told her that pretending was no longer an option. That evening, she took a walk alone in the royal gardens, hoping the quiet might help her clear her mind. The stars above Virene glimmered brightly in the night sky, and the air was cool and crisp, but the stillness did little to ease the tension that gripped her heart. As she walked among the trees, her thoughts wandered back to the meeting with Rylan. He had stood tall and calm, but there was something about his presence that had unsettled her. His eyes had held a quiet intensity, a confidence that she recognized all too well. It was as though he had seen the universe in ways that no one else had, yet he was still grounded, still human. Zyraken's footsteps slowed as she passed a small fountain. The gentle sound of water falling was soothing, but it didn't provide the peace she sought. She reached out and touched the stone edge of the fountain, her fingers tracing the carvings etched into it. She had seen this symbol before she knew it. A memory flickered, distant but clear. A long time ago, she had stood before the same fountain, a different version of herself, looking at a different human. This was the place, she realized, the place where she had first met him. It had been centuries since that day. She had been young, a princess at the time, still learning the ways of power and leadership. She had crossed paths with a human diplomat, a man whose presence had ignited something within her. She had felt the same connection, the same familiarity. But back then, she had not understood it. She had dismissed it as a fleeting moment, a chance encounter. But now, standing in the gardens alone, Zyraken knew the truth. It was not just a coincidence. This human, Captain Rylan, was part of something much bigger than either of them. The realization hit her like a wave. She had known this man before, not just in this life, but in another, one long buried in the sands of time. She had crossed paths with him once, long ago, in a different galaxy, a different empire. They had been enemies then, part of opposing forces that had fought for control of the universe. But something had changed. The war had ended and both their peoples had gone their separate ways, yet the connection remained. Zyrakin took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had to face the truth. Rylan was not just any diplomat. He was the reincarnation of a being she had once known, a being who had once been her equal, and perhaps even her better. The power he carried was not of this world, but of another, a power that had been hidden away for centuries, waiting for the right moment to resurface. As she turned to leave the garden, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. She didn't need to look to know who it was. She felt his presence even before he spoke. "Your Excellency," Captain Ryland's voice broke the silence, calm yet filled with a certain weight. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Zyrakin turned to face him, her heart racing despite herself. He stood a few paces away, his posture straight, his gaze unwavering. She had always admired his composure, his ability to remain calm in any situation. But now, in the quiet of the garden, she could feel the tension between them, the unspoken knowledge that neither of them was willing to acknowledge. "You're not disturbing me, Captain," she said, her voice cool and measured. "What brings you here?" Ryland stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "I wanted to speak with you, Empress. There is something I must ask you." Zyrakin raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "I felt a connection," Ryland said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "A strange feeling ever since I arrived. It's as if we've met before, as if this moment was destined to happen." Zyrakin's heart skipped a beat. The same words, the same feelings she had been struggling with for days. She looked at him, her mind racing. Was this the moment? Was he finally ready to acknowledge the truth? She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Perhaps we have met before, Captain." "But not in this lifetime." Ryland's expression softened, his eyes reflecting the confusion and wonder that she had felt herself. "What do you mean?" Zyrakin hesitated for a moment, then spoke the truth she had feared for so long. "You are not just a human diplomat, Captain Ryland. You are the reincarnation of a being I once knew long ago, someone whose power rivaled mine, someone who had the ability to change the course of the universe. And now you've returned." Ryland's eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that this meeting is no accident," Zyrakin replied, her voice low and firm. "You have come back to fulfill a prophecy, one that has been hidden for centuries, and now we must face what it means together." Ryland remained silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Zyrakin could see the conflict in his eyes, the disbelief battling with a deep, undeniable pull. She knew that this moment would change everything. There was no turning back now. "We have much to discuss," Zyrakin said, her voice steady. "But first, you must understand the truth of who you are and what you're destined to do." The silence that followed was heavy, the weight of their shared knowledge hanging between them. This was only the beginning, Zyrakin knew. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, or they would fall apart. The days after their conversation felt heavy, like the air had thickened with every passing moment. Captain Mark Ryland had been summoned again, this time not just for a diplomatic meeting, but for something deeper. Zyrakin could feel the weight of their past lives pulling them together, though she didn't yet know if that connection would be a blessing or a curse. As the Empress paced the halls of the palace, her mind raced. What did Ryland's return mean? She had spent years building her empire, securing peace and prosperity for her people, but now she found herself questioning everything. The prophecy, the reincarnation, the connection, it all felt like a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. When Ryland arrived that evening, his presence seemed different. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, yet his eyes betrayed a deep uncertainty. It was as though he had discovered something about himself that he didn't fully understand, something that frightened him. Zyrakin watched him as he entered the grand hall, standing tall and composed. But there was a subtle tension in his posture that told her he was no longer the same man she had first met. He had learned about his heritage, about the power that flowed through his blood, and it had changed him. "Your Excellency," Ryland greeted her, bowing slightly, though there was a hint of wariness in his voice. Zyrakin nodded, signaling for him to approach. "Captain Ryland, I trust you are well." "I'm adjusting," he replied, his voice low. "There's a lot to process, Empress." "I understand," Zyrakin said, her tone softening. She knew exactly what he meant. The burden of knowledge was heavy, and though she had been aware of her destiny for longer than she cared to admit, she knew it was different for him. He had been thrust into this reality, forced to accept the truth of who he was. She gestured for him to sit. "Let us talk, Captain. We both have much to discuss." Rylan hesitated for a moment before sitting down across from her. His eyes remained focused on her, but there was a flicker of doubt in them. He was struggling with the truth, she could tell. It was one thing to hear about a prophecy, about being the reincarnation of a powerful being. It was another to accept it. Zyrakin leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. "You understand now, don't you? What you are meant to do." Ryland's jaw tightened as he nodded slowly. "Yes, I've learned more than I ever thought I would. My heritage, my lineage, it's all overwhelming." "It is," Zyrakin agreed, her voice quiet but firm. "But this power, this connection, it's not just a part of you, Captain. It is a part of me as well. We are bound by it. Our destinies are intertwined, whether we like it or not." There was a long pause before Ryland spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "And what happens now? What do we do with this power?" Zyrakin felt a pang in her chest, a deep, almost painful recognition. The answer wasn't simple, and she had no easy solution. She had spent her entire life building an empire, a legacy, and now it seemed as though everything was teetering on the edge of collapse. She could feel it, the weight of the prophecy pushing down on her, and she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. "What happens now depends on us, Captain," she said slowly, carefully choosing her words. "We can choose to fight this destiny, to deny the connection between us. But that would only bring destruction, or we can accept it. We can work together to shape the future, but that too comes with risks." Ryland stared at her, his brow furrowed. "And what are those risks?" Zyrakin didn't look away. "If we embrace our roles, if we join forces, we can change the course of the galaxy. We can rebuild, reshape the future. But there are others who will never allow that to happen. There are forces, both within my empire and beyond, that will stop at nothing to keep this power from being unleashed. There are those who would use it for their own gain." "And if we don't join forces?" Rylan asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "Then we will fall," Zyrakin said simply. "My empire will crumble, and the power that resides in you will be wasted. We cannot afford to let that happen." Ryland's eyes searched hers, as if trying to read her, trying to understand whether she was telling the truth or trying to manipulate him. But Zyrakin held his gaze, unwavering. She had spent years building her empire, and now she was willing to risk it all for a future she couldn't yet see. "We have no choice," she continued, her voice more resolute now. "Our connection is too strong, Captain. Whether you want it or not, you and I are bound together. We can't ignore it." Rylan remained silent for a long moment, his eyes drifting downward as if weighing the decision in his mind. Finally, he looked up, his gaze more determined. "I don't know if I can accept all of this. It's not just about the power, it's about who I am now. I'm not the same person I was before I came here." "You are not the same," Zyrakin agreed, "but that does not mean you are lost. We will figure this out together, step by step. We must." He nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to try." Zyrakin reached across the table, her hand resting just inches from his. "We will make this work, Captain, together." Rylan looked at her hand for a moment before slowly reaching out to place his own beside it. The touch was tentative, as if neither of them was quite ready to fully embrace the future that lay before them. But it was a start, and for now that was enough. As they sat there in silence, the weight of the moment settled over them. There was no going back now. The prophecy had already begun to unfold, and their paths were forever linked. The universe was vast and their future uncertain, but for the first time, Zyrakin felt a sense of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Their destinies were no longer separate. They had been brought together by forces beyond their control, and now it was up to them to decide what came next. Would they be the rulers of a new era, or would they fall prey to the same forces that had sought to control the galaxy for centuries? Zyrakin didn't have all the answers. She couldn't predict the future. But she knew one thing for certain: whatever happened, she wouldn't face it alone. She had Captain Mark Rylan by her side, and together they would determine the fate of their world. The days following their agreement were filled with urgency. Zyrakin and Rylan knew that time was not on their side. Forces both within her empire and from outside were already moving, sensing the shift in power. The Empress had always been a master of controlling her empire, but now she felt like a pawn in a much larger game, one she hadn't fully understood until now. The truth of her past and Rylan's destiny was much bigger than either of them had realized. As the sun set over Virene, the palace was quiet. The guards stood at attention, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon, but within the walls of the palace, there was an air of tension that neither could ignore. Zyrakin and Rylan had spent every waking hour preparing for the moment that was fast approaching. There was no time for hesitation. The prophecy, the power that flowed through them both, was beginning to take hold in ways they couldn't yet understand. Zyrakin stood in front of the large window in her chambers, staring out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, and yet it felt small to her now. She had ruled for so long, but the weight of her responsibility had never felt heavier. She had been prepared for everything, rebellions, wars, betrayals, but she hadn't been prepared for this. She hadn't been prepared for Captain Mark Rylan. The door to her chambers opened quietly, and she didn't need to turn to know who it was. Rylan stepped inside, his presence calm but filled with a quiet intensity. He had changed over the past few days, just as she had. They were no longer just two rulers meeting for a diplomatic purpose. They were bound together, connected by a power that neither could escape. "Empress," Rylan said, his voice steady, yet there was a trace of unease in it. "We need to talk." Zyrakin turned to face him. "What is it?" "There are whispers," he began, his gaze never leaving hers. "From within your empire, there are those who know about us, about our connection. They are preparing for something, and I don't think they intend to let us work together." Zyrakin's eyes narrowed. She had suspected as much. The enemies within her empire were always waiting for the right moment to strike. She had always been vigilant, but now she had Rylan's power to think about as well. The stakes had become much higher. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with an edge of authority. "They are the council," Rylan replied. "The ones who advised you for so long. They've known about the prophecy for centuries, and they fear what it means." "They don't trust me, and they don't trust you anymore." Zyrakin's heart sank. The council had been her most trusted advisors, but now it seemed they had their own agendas. She had always suspected that some of them were more interested in power than in serving the empire, but she had never thought they would turn on her. It was clear now that they feared the prophecy and what it would mean for their rule. "We have to move quickly," she said, her voice firm. "We cannot let them interfere. I will not allow them to take this empire from me." Rylan nodded. "We need to act before they can make their move, but it's not just the council. There are others too, people outside the empire who have been waiting for the right moment. They've heard the stories of a human with power beyond their understanding, and they know you're involved." Zyrakin's thoughts raced. The enemies she had already faced had been formidable, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for her throne. This was a battle for the future of the galaxy, and it was one she couldn't win alone. "We will face them together," she said, her voice unwavering. "We cannot allow them to control our destiny." Rylan stepped forward, his gaze steady. "Then what do we do?" Zyrakin paused, considering their options. They could run, but there was nowhere to hide. They could fight, but the council's forces were vast, and there were too many unknowns. She had always been a master of strategy, but now she realized that this battle wasn't just about military power. It was about control of the future, and the prophecy that had brought them together was the key. "We do both," she said finally. "We fight, but we also reveal the truth. We show the galaxy who we really are, and we let them see the power we hold. We will not hide anymore." Rylan's eyes met hers, and for the first time since they had joined forces, Zyrakin saw something new in him, a spark of determination, a recognition of the weight they carried together. He was ready just as she was. "We'll need allies," Rylan said. "We'll need the support of the galaxy if we're going to stand against them." Zyrakin nodded. "We will start with the ones who trust us, the ones who have stood by me for years. The rest will follow once they see what we can do." As they spoke, the palace began to hum with activity. Soldiers were preparing for battle, strategists were laying out plans, and the empire was bracing itself for the coming storm. Zyrakin knew that this would be a turning point. The choices they made in the coming days would determine the fate of not just the empire, but the entire galaxy. The first assault came at dawn. The council, along with their allies, launched a surprise attack, hoping to catch Zyrakin and Rylan off guard. They underestimated the strength of the Empress and the power of the human by her side. As the attack began, Zyrakin was already prepared. Her forces had been mobilized, her strategy set. She had learned long ago that the best way to win a war was not just with force, but with knowledge, and she had more than enough of both. Rylan fought beside her, his skill and experience proving invaluable as they pushed back the attackers. They moved together with a fluidity that spoke of the deep connection between them. Every move, every decision seemed to come as second nature. And as the battle raged on, Zyrakin felt a sense of clarity that she had never known before. But it wasn't just their enemies who were falling. The true battle was still ahead, the battle for control of the galaxy, for the future of their people, and for the destiny that neither of them could escape. Hours passed, and the battle seemed to slow. The enemies who had once been so confident now found themselves struggling, realizing that they had underestimated the combined power of the Empress and the human she had chosen to stand by her side. As the dust began to settle, Zyrakin and Rylan stood in the midst of the battlefield, their enemies retreating. They had won the day, but the war was far from over. Zyrakin looked at Rylan, her heart filled with a new understanding. They were no longer just rulers or soldiers. They were partners bound by the prophecy, their fates intertwined. Together they would reshape the future. "We have won this battle," she said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet triumph. "But the true war is just beginning. We must be ready for what comes next." Rylan nodded, his expression resolute. "Together,"